Hi everybody, welcome back to 30 Days Until Dawn. It's January 2nd, and we are working on our month of revision. And so we're starting off with our first section. This first week is going to be about content. And we're going to get into things like line breaks and rhyme and alliteration, when to do it and why to do it, and when not to do it a lot of the time later. And but this first maybe week or so, we're really going to be thinking about the content of poems. And today we're going to be thinking two ideas. First is layering, and second is where are you? And this gets to kind of the heart of a lot of people's problems. I'm going to start off by reading a poem. This poem is called The Iceberg Theory. It's by Gerald Lachlan. A lot of you know Jerry Lachlan. And I'm going to read it and then we're going to talk about it. And you can find this online. I don't want to repost this on my blog because that would be illegal, but reading it is fair use. The Iceberg Theory. All the food critics hate iceberg lettuce. You'd think romaine was descended from Orpheus's laurel wreath. You'd think raw spinach had all the nutritional benefits attributed to it by Popeye. Not to mention aesthetic subtleties worthy of Verlaine and Debussy. They'll even salivate over chopped red cabbage, just to disparage poor old Mr. Iceberg lettuce. And I guess the problem is it's just too common for them. It doesn't matter that it tastes good, has a satisfying crunchy texture, holds its freshness, and has crevices for the dressing, whereas the darker leafy varieties are often bitter, gritty, and flat. It just isn't different enough, and it's too goddamn American. Of course, a critic has to criticize. A critic has to have something to say. Perhaps that's why literary critics purport to find interesting so much contemporary poetry that just bores the shit out of me. At any rate, I really enjoy a salad with plenty of chunky iceberg lettuce, the more the merrier, drenched in Italian or Roquefort dressing. And the poems I enjoy are those I don't have to pretend I'm enjoying. Okay, so this is a poem by Gerald Lachlan, and I suggest you look it up. But what he's talking about here is iceberg lettuce and how he enjoys eating it. And I think you noticed probably that he kind of goes off on tangents here because he's doing two things here. He's layering and he's finding himself in the poem. Now, what do I mean by layering? Actually, let's think about that poem first. What's happening in this poem? Well, on the top of it, ostensibly, he's talking about iceberg lettuce, right? And if you go to a restaurant, which he does a lot, he's a food connoisseur. You get a salad, and usually it's not iceberg lettuce. It's usually some sort of fancy thing. He says, you know what? I like that. Okay, but let's go deeper into this poem. What is the title of this poem is The Iceberg Principle? The Iceberg Theory. The Iceberg Theory refers to Hemingway's theory, he called the Iceberg Theory. And he said that good writing should exist, you should only see 10%, and that should suggest 90%. Just like an iceberg has 10% above, or whatever the percentage is above the waves, and then 90% below. So this whatever you see up top suggests a whole bunch of other things. In other words, what he's saying is there should be such telling actions and telling ideas that it suggests a whole world of ideas, right? And if you've ever read any of Hemingway's work, you know what he's talking about. Like him or not, he's suggesting a lot with what he's doing. He's suggesting whole societies. Okay, so so he's made reference to this idea, and what he's suggesting by that title is that there's more going on here than meets the eye. He starts off by talking. He starts off by talking about how much he likes iceberg lettuce. And then he gets to the point where he says it's too American, right? What he's suggesting there is that there's nothing necessarily wrong with the American style, which is often very direct, very clear, very straightforward. Then he starts talking about poetry. He's saying critics don't like what they purport to like. Both in food and in poetry, bores the shit out of me. And what he's suggesting is that the straightforward American literary style, especially from Long Beach, which is where he's from, should have and does have layers of meaning that literary critics and outside readers are often blind to. So the poem becomes, yes, it's about lettuce and it's about him, but it's also a discussion of the American take on, or I'm sorry, the critic's take on American poetry, which is short-sighted. And what he's really talking about here is that the level of complexity that exists under the surface that lesser intellects aren't able to see, right? Now that's a lot going on for one little poem, right? And it's kind of an extraordinary poem because of that, and I've seen a lot of people kind of miss the layering effects. What he's done, however, is he's located himself, and he's also layered it with ideas. Now, what do I mean by these two things? The first one is when we write poetry, sometimes you write your first 10, 20, 30, 100 poems, and then you start really getting into poetry. I mean, there's something unsatisfying. You think, well, I'm just kind of writing about myself. This is just narrative about, it's the same old narrative over and over and over again. What to do when you start feeling that, what a lot of poetry really absolutely needs is another layer of complexity. Where do you find that layer? You find that within yourself. You find that without yourself, right? You find that those things that you are expert on, right? And you're able to put them in. In this case, what he's done is he's layered it with two things, with Hemingway criticism and with lettuce. There's two of these things going on. The danger of doing this, however, is you often lose yourself. It's important that you're able to identify yourself inside the poem. You're able to identify a human emotion that we can all relate to. And in this case, he's that feeling that we have that we're all different and separated and we're not as smart as everyone else, and he's defending himself against that, right? Okay, does this make sense? I hope so. Okay, so what am I going to ask you to do? I'm going to ask you to find a poem that you are unsatisfied with. And post it down below, and then, well, maybe not, find the poem that you're unsatisfied with, and try to identify the multiple layers of meaning, right? I don't think there needs to be 15 or 20 or anything, but if you're unsatisfied with it, there's a very good chance that you don't have that multiple layer of meaning. If you're unsatisfied with it and it's not missing this, I want you to try to find yourself in it. And sometimes that's what's happening, right? There's not enough emotion because you were nowhere in there. I'll do this all the time, right? And so I like to write about art history, and I like to write about, what else do I like to write about the forest, right? But if I'm not there in the forest, what I have then, okay, so say I write a poem about the forest. The first thing I want to write about when I get out in the forest is, have you ever been to the Sequoia National Forest? It's really interesting. People will stop driving as soon as they see the first giant sequoia tree. And the reason they do is it's like seeing fireworks, right? It's a non-intellectual moment. You just go, wow, right? Right? And you stop. It's really interesting to see. And so the first poem that you kind of feel like writing is, "Oh tree, oh grand tree, thou art so big," right? You can't do that because there's none of you here, and there's no layering. So what do I do when I want to write about it? A sequoia tree is a very difficult thing to write about because it's so obviously stunning. I think it's, first of all, really important for me to go inside the science. That's layering. One thing I found out this summer was that giant sequoia trees are ice cold inside. Their insulation is so good, and where they're drawing their water from is so cold that for their entire lives, the inside of the tree is just almost at freezing, just above freezing, right? And then I'm going to bring myself into that. What does that mean for me? Well, I try to compare myself to the tree, or I try to think about the tree. I try to think about what's happening here and what's happening here, right? Okay, so what is your assignment for today? I want you to find that poem that's unsatisfying, and I want you to think about maybe a couple of ways of adding. Maybe put that unsatisfying poem below, and then talk about, okay, I think I need to layer this thing, and we're also going to jump in there too. Try to take a look at one or two other of the poems down below, and see if you can comment on them. And that might happen tomorrow because it might take a while for people to put stuff up today. But just when you can, try to get into that. I'm going to try to do that too. And I'm actually, it might take me a couple of days. Today I'm traveling to Fresno to teach a class in Fresno, and some of you might be in that class, I don't know. And so it might take me until the 3rd or the 4th to really make intelligent comments below. Okay, so when you're done, post down below, and I'll see you tomorrow in 30 days until then.